Welcome to the Akademisk Boldcast, the official Akademisk Boldklub podcast, in which we dissect the team's latest performances in the Bold Breakdown, explore the individual insights of the playing, coaching, and executive personnel through exclusive interviews in the Owl's Nest, plus provide a preview of its future foes in the look ahead. I am your host, Sean Cabrera, and in today's feature, we will be spotlighting what AB executed correctly and what AB had to learn from that postponed Matchweek 1 fixture against Ishøj IF, and from that intense 5-goal clash versus Thisted Boldklub in Matchweek 4. With just 2 matches played, Akademisk Boldklub found itself in a mid-table menagerie with 3 points to its name, thanks to that 2-1 win against Brabant. Meanwhile, Ishøj, after attaining promotion from the 3rd division at the end of spring 2024, initially found itself struggling with the faster tempo of the 2nd division. And it makes sense, after all, it marked the first time in its young 8-year history in which it achieved professional status as a 2nd division side. In spite of having to compete in the relegation round in its debut Campobet and Division season, Ishøj ended up leading that pack on points. Even though Ishøj found a draw in Matchweek 2 and was somewhat dominated by rescheduled, despite what the 2-1 losing scoreline may otherwise imply, the club had been leaving some head-scratching around the league. Purely on paper, it was a team that went undefeated in 6 of its last 7 matches, and given those 2 numbers so close together, I apologize if your kid or whoever is next to you ended up doing that up and down hand gesture, but I digress. Ishøj went undefeated in 6 of those last 7 matches up until this point, and when you look at all those games, each was determined by a goal differential of 1 or less, so there were no runaways whatsoever. Likewise, of the 6 non-losing results, 4 of them were ties, stalemates. Ishøj knew how to keep games close, maybe a little too close to its detriment, so it ultimately had the intimidating test of pulling the rug from under the Akademiks, a projected powerhouse that wouldn't be satiated with shared points. Of course, because of the weather delay in the first place, the match officially restarted at the 14th minute on a fortunately sunny day. Surprisingly though, the Red Eagles, not the Owls, were the ones who dictated the possession and even shot-taking in the first half, especially when a strike nicked the exterior part of Adam Benedictson's near post within the opening quarter hour, which technically would be the half-hour mark or so. We know that AB has been feared for its ability to maintain a stronghold in these facets of the game throughout the season. Nevertheless, Ishøj pulled off a rare feat in holding onto the ball longer than its opponent during the first period of play, and more interestingly, doing so by the green and white third of the field. In other words, Ishøj was possessing the ball for a good chunk of that first period in the opposition's half. Now, the Akademiks' creativity in the first half stalled quite a bit due to the aggressive man-to-man marking as well as efficient possession from Ishøj. It's also important to note that Kasper Reining's unlucky injury had an effect on the game, considering that he's been labeled as a clever winger when the ball's at his feet. Jonathan Matthijs, one of the summer signings, made his second AB appearance in a 2nd division contest when he replaced the injured Reining on the left wing. The second half, for the most part, did not see much difference from Ishøj in its tactics, but there was a notable decrease in shot efficiency, almost as though it became gradually more complacent with the idea of containing its opponent and sharing a point each. And it's that lackadaisical approach that was just enough for the Akademiks to stun the Red Eagles in the final 7 minutes of regulation time, when a backline clearance turned into a pinpointed lob that was redirected by Noah Engel's posterior part of his skull. The defender, nearest to Jonathan Matthijs, intentionally slid into the ball, trying to sell some sort of foul to the referee, who correctly ignored those complaints. Matthijs, with one strong touch, knocked the ball onto the edge of the 18-yard box, where he clinically scanned the situation in a heartbeat. This newcomer saw that he had 2 viable lateral options, but his youthful audacity took over, and he decided to smash his shot to the bottom corner of the near post. And at that point, You gotta talk about making a statement, especially when you consider that he is now the leading goal scorer of the squad so far at the time of this recording. It just makes too much sense when you bet on yourself to fulfill a finish like that with a win on the line. In stoppage time, AB made sure to clamp down its opposition in the middle third, securing its second victory of the season thanks to a super sub moment from Mattis. Now, Akademisk Boldklub acknowledged those first half struggles since its possession-heavy style was countered, but the most significant element was the psychological one, maintaining a solid drive and fighting to the full-time whistle to secure the game-winning goal, responding solidly to the unanticipated adversity through this tenacious victory. Speaking of adversity, the Academics knew that they had to do their homework for the following week and prepare for a Thisted opposition that had not lost any of its last 8 official contests. Before we continue with the second half of this bold breakdown, this segment of the Akademisk Boldcast has been brought to you by Myriad 360, a trusted global IT solutions partner for high-growth tech companies and enterprise innovators, delivering best-in-class solutions across cybersecurity, modern data center, networking, cloud, and AI. Visit myriad360.com for a complimentary strategy session. And speaking of strategy sessions, here we're going to talk about TFC and its impressive turnaround from relegation group runner-up the prior season to second place side in the Danish second division at this point, all of which were planted during that 2024-2025 campaign in which it had the worst overall possession rate, worst shots attempted per match average, and worst pass accuracy average in the league. Again, they had problems from the middle third upward. That being said, its best asset was consistently its back line that had astounding discipline. Least number of yellow cards, least number of fouls given up, and the third highest number of interceptions. As a result, its sporting staff prioritized the signing of 4 forwards that also happened to show comfort, if not experience, in the midfield, a midfielder as well to be aggregated alongside those forwards, as well as a myriad of free transfers, including that of Markus Emerson, who has otherwise proven to be a star here at AB, but I am getting a little bit ahead of myself. With these signings, Thisted was beginning to prove itself as a respectable rival to Akademisk Boldklub and the rest of the league. Thanks to a last-minute equalizer scored by ex-AB player Christian Vauna in a 2-2 draw versus VSK Aarhus, Thisted rescued itself a point and obtained that previously stated second-place standing. Again, one could argue that this wouldn't have been possible without those key signings, and they would come in handy in that Matchweek 4 showdown at Gladsaxe Stadion, home of the Academics, who had gone undefeated in its last 5 encounters involving this visitor since 2022. Even then, Coach Gudjonsson knew better than to underestimate the enemy, per his pre-match words, emphasizing the need to play sharply and acknowledging his opponent's defensive philosophy. It took 61 seconds for Thisted to get 2 throw-ins in the final third. Now you may be wondering, why is such a commonplace routine important? So much so that I'm mentioning it here. It's just a throw-in, right? Well, because by the 92nd second of the match, one long throw-in found its way into the 6-yard box, connecting first with a TFC player, and then a point-blank range poke for the lightning-fast opening goal. AB wouldn't get its first official shot attempted until Vesterholm decided it was time in the 10th minute of action. And emphasis on the word action there, because it turns out his effort was blocked by a TFC hand, which resulted in the team's first penalty kick of the season. Markus Emerson was then put in charge of punishing his former team. Remember, he was one of Thisted's departures during the summer transfer window. Emerson decided that the right bottom corner was his target, and after winding up his leg, the goalkeeper would have had a successful intervention had he kept at least 1 foot on the goal line. The assistant referee caught that goalkeeping encroachment right away, so Emerson was granted an immediate chance at redemption, and then went with the gutsy decision to shoot the ball in the exact same way to the exact same spot. Fortunately for him, his team would surround him in the 14th minute, celebrating his first AB goal in league play. A rather silent 10 minutes would ensue, but it did not take long for something noteworthy to occur. Now stop me if you've heard this one before. Thisted launches a long throw-in the attacking third from its right-hand side into the 6-yard box. The ball connects with a TFC player's head first, and somebody is there to poke it into the back of the net for the lead. The scenario was nearly identical to the first conceded goal by AB. The only difference was that the ball was redirected to the back post and headed beyond the goal line instead of the near post tap-in like the first goal. Point still stands though. For those with excellent memory, you may recall in the last episode that AB conceded a headed goal from Prabran, and exactly a week later, the same was repeated here by Thisted. Despite the slight improvement in between the Prabran and Thisted matches, AB was struggling on not only winning those initial aerial duels, winning approximately an average of 42% in that calendar week or calendar frame, but also on containing those rebounds or second balls due to a lack of proper anticipation. Just like any other Campo B in Division competitor, there's always a weakness to exploit, and TFC capitalized on this defensive aspect for AB by crashing the goal every time with at least 4 players surrounding the 6-yard box in those situations. In fact, 5 minutes later, the visitors executed the same plan, this time from a left-hand side throw-in with 4 players on the border of the 6-yard box. Fortunately for AB, Benedictson was there to seize the ball and the airspace, but it still goes to show that AB was struggling with those aerial scenarios. After Benedictson had to rescue his team several times and a disallowed shot that rattled off the crossbar, AB wouldn't get an official shot, let alone shot on target, until the 42nd minute, when Mako Vesterholm engineered a fabulous pre-assist by lobbing the ball from just a tad in front of the halfway line to just outside the penalty area. Perfectly placed so that Markus Emerson would nudge the ball to his right-hand side, stumping both the charging goalkeeper and pursuing defenders, so that Spacey Hailton would have a wide open net for an equalizer, his first goal of the season. Less than 2 minutes later, AB intended on stealing back some momentum when Hailton from the right wing outside the 18-yard box dribbled inward and found some wiggle room for a shot that was eventually repelled by the goalkeeper's torso. The second half did see a more confident academic side that outshot, outcrossed, and outpassed, and in the air, outdueled its TFC foes. In spite of how beautiful this sport is, it can also clearly be cruel, and that was the case in the 73rd minute when Christian Vauna scored against his former green and white team so that Thisted could take the lead for a third time. Although this wasn't a throw-in, the visitors still profited from exploiting the wide right side space of the pitch, considering that a 1-2 pass was all that was needed in order to serve in a cross-gone assist. Because the back line was rather scattered in that quick sequence, nobody noticed that the eventual scorer was left unmarked and already within the 6-yard box upon contact. AB would uphold the quick tempo, and after several intercepted crosses and shots on target, the Gladsaxe locals would end up losing its second straight home match, something which hadn't been done from September 21st, 2024 to October 5th, 2024. There were really 2 big takeaways from this loss from the AB perspective. 1, AB had to improve defensively the aerial situation and by extension those unsuccessful second balls. 2, we obviously know now how versatile this team has been when it comes to lineups, but in this game, the team maintained a 4-3-3 formation, which was being outnumbered in the midfield by TFC's 3-5-2 formation, that when attacking turned into a 3-4-3. So the team had to experience the importance of formation diversity and middle third dominance, something we've seen with that comfortable modification revolving around a malleable 4-4-2 shape in present time. I'm sure Sporting Director Jen Chang has some words of wisdom regarding this gradual improvement in the midfield specifically, and fortunately for us, we've got him for the Owl's Nest, sponsored by Datum. The secret of every hyperscale cloud is a laundry list of capabilities most builders have never heard of. Datum is on a mission to unlock these internet superpowers and help 1,000 new clouds thrive in the age of AI. Learn more at datum.net. Without further ado, let's flock to the Owl's Nest. So we're back in the Owl's Nest here for episode 2 of the official Akademisk Boldklub podcast. And alongside me here, once again, is Jen Chang, the sporting director of AB. Jen, how are you doing again?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Always available for us, always speaking with us and sharing some words of wisdom. And I think that's exactly what we need to discuss here, considering that obviously in the first weeks of AB's campaign, not everything went according to plan. And here in the delayed Matchweek 1 match, alongside that fixture versus Thisted, we retroactively know that AB started its season with 2 consecutive home losses and 2 consecutive victories on the road. So what had made these home games seemingly tougher than the away ones?
Yeah, I don't think there was any specific correlation to whether it was a home or away game. I mean, I think basically the safe assumption is for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, first 5 or 6 games, we were not, as fluid as we were towards the end of the spring. And the reasons for that are quite simple. We had touched on it in the last podcast where I talked about the front line. The front line was missing 2 or 3 of our starting projected players. And at the same time, we had 2 new fullbacks, 2 new starting fullbacks. The two fullbacks from last spring had both decided to move in the summer, even though the club tried to keep both of them. So we had 2 new starting fullbacks, and that obviously has an impact on the back line in terms of the way we press, them understanding when to go, when to stay. And all that is correlated because you have, 2 new fullbacks, you have 2 or 3 of the starting forwards missing. It affects the way we press. So, that's part of the reason. For the first 3 games, we had the 2 new starting fullbacks. And then in the 4th game, because of the condensed week schedule where we played Brabant, Ishøj, and then we also played Thisted, the coaching staff had decided to make multiple changes for the Thisted game. I believe it was 5 changes for that game. So actually in that game, we had a totally new pair of starting fullbacks as well. So it was already bad enough with the 2 new fullbacks learning. Then we had 2 new fullbacks on top of that. So those are all things that add to, less than optimum play. And it's just a case of the players learning the dynamics and getting used to each other and things like that. I mean, obviously you try to have as little change as possible, but sometimes football is just not possible because players they seek moves and sometimes they get offers where other teams can offer them something we can't offer. And in those situations, you're forced to make changes.
That makes sense. So it sounds like it's sort of a combination or amalgamation of a luck of the draw situation, not to mention that you just said that AB had a very compact, if not busy, week itself. Like you said, they had one match on that weekend, followed up by that midweek match versus Ishøj, and then, of course, you touched upon that defeat versus Thisted. So it was a very, very tight schedule, and like you said, the back line, there was some experimentation on behalf of head coach Joey Gudjonsson at that point of the season. And I guess that transitions nicely when you're talking about the defensive aspects of the game.
Right.
Throughout those first weeks, AB somewhat struggled in defensive aerial and second ball scenarios, which was shown in the first 2 conceded goals against Thisted, of course, both coming from throw-ins. Not too long, the recipient would just whip it in, and the next thing you know, in came a follow-up header, or rather, throw-in, taken, long throw-in, made its way into the box. It would be knocked, obviously, by the side of a head of an opponent. Next thing you know, it's poked into the back of the net. So what was the coaching staff's approach in order to fix these elements of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Thisted game, the set piece long throws didn't take the team by surprise. We had, worked on it going into that game. Obviously, in the game there were some assignment errors, things like that. It was obviously not well defended. I don't think anybody would claim otherwise. With set pieces of that nature, it's just repetition and working on it in training and just learning from those mistakes. Obviously, we did not handle those throw-ins as well as we should have. Um, and I think that the later one we concede against Winchester a few weeks later is a completely different scenario. That ball is headed 4 or 5 times within the box, and so that was more of a pinball, unlucky goal. I think against Thisted, it was just a breakdown in terms of zonal coverage, and certain players needed to be picked up man to man and weren't picked up, and so it's just a collective assignment error by the team, and I think they learned from it. We've been working on those things, and I think as the season went along, we got better at those.
Absolutely agree with you in regard to the improvement later on. And I guess this goes back full circle to what you said with the lack of chemistry established then due to the experimentation of the back line. I know that
Hmm.
obviously has something to do with it. One aspect of the game, however, that I didn't hear you mention was specifically the midfield. And as you know, AB's midfield is normally an authoritative force in every fixture in which it has to deliver, in which it encounters. However, AB's midfield was not as dominant as it normally is in that victory at Ishøj, and
Yeah,
it needed to get over a 25-minute hump before it established a firm tempo in that defeat versus Thisted. So,
yeah.
how has the midfield improved since those two matches, and what was specifically done to accomplish this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything was done specifically. Again, with the midfielders, it's really just a question of players learning to fit in the dynamics. Obviously, Marco Vesson came to us from Skive. So the Ishøj and the Brabant games were just his second and third games with the team. And so, and then sometimes, obviously, when you play away against certain teams that play a certain style, it is very um, difficult. Teams play more aggressively when they're at home against us, as opposed to when they play at our stadium, and so it's a different approach. So no two games are really the same. And Broadband is a very difficult team to play against. They're very physical. There's a lot of long balls. A lot of the balls bypass the midfield. So it's a stylistic difference. So I wouldn't say we changed anything. The nature, the way we played those teams changed based on the way those teams played against us. And again, we had different starting lineup combinations in those 4 games in midfield. So it's just about the coaches finding the right chemistry on the field and the right lineup and mixing and matching because all our midfield does have different traits and strengths and they bring different things to the table. So it's just finding the right balance for each game.
Now, I suppose with the midfield and after all that mixing and matching, what has really been the core identifying trait of the green and white midfield? So, in other words, is it their creativity? Is it maybe the bang bang ability of able to produce plays quickly, if not out of nowhere? I just want to hear your opinion on that. What has been the core identifying trait?
Yeah, so for us, our midfielders are, you know, we rely on them a lot in terms of high pressure and pressing and protecting the back line. And most importantly, we play the ball forward. Every team has a different philosophy on how they want their build up to be. We are, very focused on playing the ball forward and getting the ball into the final third, towards our front line. That doesn't mean we're trying to send the ball long. Um, when we say we want to play direct, it means we want to play the ball forward on the ground, play through the lines, play behind the lines. That's what we want to do. We don't want to spend too much time with the ball in our own half. We want to concentrate the ball in their half.
We have to rewind a little bit to that teaser defeat. Obviously, it's not something we want to linger on, but
Mhm.
it did have some secondary effects, perhaps, throughout the later portions of the campaign. Because if memory serves me correctly, it was the first, now present day, top six side that AB had faced.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was a challenge from there. What takeaways did you see, or rather, did the team learn from that defeat versus Teasdale in order to go against or go toe to toe with other promotion round qualifying teams at this moment, at the time of this recording?
Yeah, so I actually think, for us, we were the only team that week to play 3 games, which necessitated changes. Obviously, we would like to have kept the lineup and the starting lineup that had won the 2 games previous, but you can't run out the same lineup for 3 games, 90-minute games in a row. And I know the Ishøj game was truncated to 75 minutes, but the sort of general principle stands. I do think we probably underestimated Thisted that game. Coming into the season, I actually thought Thisted would be pretty good because there are 3 or 4 really good quality players on that team. But I think Thisted, most people would agree, were the biggest surprise of the 4. They had a very specific way of playing, and they had a striker that could convert goals for them, and they are 2 very active, creative midfielders who are quite dangerous. So I think we just underestimated them, and then when you combine that with the fact that we had some defensive set piece defending issues, and the fact that, as I say, our chemistry is not completely fluid for various reasons, it just sort of combined all that into a tough game. And I think that the takeaway from that game is you just have to be, very on it every game when you face opposition, and not assume things about opposition. Because I think Thisted surprised a lot of people in the fall, not just us.
Yeah, that is true. We did label in the last episode about how Thisted has become a dark horse gone powerhouse. And you said it yourself, and this is why you're the sporting director, Jen. You said it yourself. You foresaw how this team had some promising talent, had some promising quality, but for Thisted's ability to go from a relegation group team from last season to now a top 6 competitor, it is something admirable, and it's something that demonstrates the quality of the Danish second division, in which AB finds itself and in which it actively competes. Of course, it is leading right now during the winter break at the top of the standings, but like you said, it just goes to show that on any given day, as much as that cliche statement has been made, anything can really happen. And AB took from that the psychological aspect of not necessarily underestimating, but like you said, always being on top of it, always being aware and prepared for any sort of opponent, whether that be a top 6 or not. So, Jen, thank you very much for your words. Thank you for always analyzing here and being available to talk with us. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thanks a lot. Take care.
A special thanks again to Sporting Director Chang for his insight. This now leads us to our look ahead for episode 3, in which we investigate whether AB learnt its midfield-related lessons from that victory versus Ishøj, and its defense-related lessons from that Thisted defeat when it faced in consecutive weeks not 1, but 2 more teams that at this moment actively find themselves in contention for promotion, Vendsyssel and Næstved. 2 teams that echo AB's possession-heavy style of play and high shot output statistics in comparison to the rest of the Danish second division. This look ahead has been sponsored by Plane. Simple, intelligent, extensible. Plane.so offers modern project management for all teams. Go to plane.so to learn more. This has been Sean Cabrera, and thank you for listening to the Akademisk Boldcast. See you in the next one. Ciao, ciao for now.